Homestead, Teneriffe, Fortitude Valley area is probably about 35. We are very close to the central business district now. On our left, when we turn this corner, you'll see the frame of a gasometer, and during the 1970s we had a bit of a dark period in our history when we had no gasometer is still there because the developer wasn't allowed to demolish it because it was part of our history. All this area was industrialised. We had a sugar refinery, we had a powerhouse, we had tramways, we had wool stores, we had a pineapple factory, we had a sawmill. So it all happened from where we are now to the river, all in that area. And so that gasometer really is symbolic of all of that industrial activity. So all of that went in the early 1990s, and it all went out to the mouth of the river. Thank goodness, because we used to have big semi-trailers down here through Ann Street. I couldn't imagine what it would be like now. It's bad enough without them. So the street on the left is called James Street, and that has a theatre and several restaurants. It's a very popular spot, a few very upmarket hotels as well. Do we have anyone from Melbourne on board? No one? Okay. Well, there's a bit of a competition, I think, between Melbourne and Brisbane, because Melbourne's got a lot of very interesting laneways, so we didn't want them getting ahead of us. So we had a plan a few years back to jazz up our laneways. So one of those on the left here is Wing Lane. We've got quite a good music scene here in Brisbane. And another one which was developed in the 1860s on the right here is Bakery Lane, with that tiny little opening there. It was an apothecary. So on the left, a beautiful old hotel, the Empire Hotel, designed by Richard Gailey, who was quite prolific in the late 1800s. And on our right is Chinatown Mall. That's actually not the main Chinatown Mall, it's out at Sunnybank, another suburb. On our left is All Hallows Girls' School, and that was established by the Sisters of Mercy in 1860. On the right, you'll notice that there's a whole lot of apartments, and those apartments really are sitting on land which was designated to have a cathedral. But one story is that that money went back to Rome to be blessed. It didn't come back, so the Catholic Church sold it off. So we'll go left here. All good? So we're going to go down into the lower end of Queen Street, and directly down below us is an area which is relatively new called the Howard Smith Wharves. Petrie Brothers, and the coat of arms on the front of the building says Advance Australia Fair. So we can't understand why, because 1901 was when we actually had our federation. These days the University of Queensland leases the building, and they hold many conferences and concerts and the like in that building, and it has pretty good views because it sits right beside the river. As you can see, the only thing that's constant around here is change. And we're coming in now to the what I call the Golden Triangle, because this is where we've got our stock exchange and a whole lot of international offices, offices of international companies, I should say. So down here on the right you have got a lovely old Moreton Bay fig tree. That tree probably is more than 100 years old, and the reason that it thrives is its roots go down into a creek called Wheat Creek, and that Wheat Creek actually goes under our City Hall, and in 2010 we had to spend a lot of money to underpin the foundations of City Hall, simply because they built the City Hall on swampy banks of a creek. So on our left here, this Eagle Street Pier area, this area is about to be demolished, sadly, as you can see, and another building is going to take its place. So just as we go around the corner on the left here, we've got the what used to be the premises of a shipping company, 1888, Meldham House, and there is a little bronze plaque on the corner column, 11 and 1974, but unfortunately the barricade for this construction site, it blocks those bronze plaques. So yeah, we're going to go left into Edward Street and drive along the City Botanic Gardens now. This area, during the 2011 floods, we had little boats on the river, on the street, I should say. So Edward Street in our early days was a pretty swampy, mosquito-infested, downtrodden area where we had a lot of industry. We had foundries, we had shipbuilding, and we had navy, because even though we federated Australian states in 1901, each state had their own navy. So the hotel down here, it's the Stanford Plaza, it was built in the premises of the old naval officers, 4-star hotel. It was totally inundated in 2011, which were initially established as market gardens for the convicts, and then we had an English curator, Walter Hill, and he experimented with a whole lot of tropical plants such as sugarcane, pineapples, bananas, mangoes, and because the British knew nothing about those sorts of plants. And as in addition to that, it is from these gardens that we sent the plant stock for the macadamia nut, which we used to call the Queensland nut. And all those macadamia nut plantations that you've seen, the seeds for those trees came from right here. So up here on our right is a lovely old building. It always reminds me of Raffles in Singapore. This building was designed by the colonial architect F.D.G. Stanley, and it was to house the Brisbane, the Queensland Club. And the Queensland Club is a gentleman's only club to this day, so our female Premier of State cannot be a member, which is a bit of a problem. But that building there on the right is where many people who needed to do business with the government would stay, and still do. And on about 11 o'clock is Old Parliament House. Old Parliament House. It was built in a couple of stages that you're about to drive past, and two of those are 6-star hotels. 2 of them are residential towers, which are a sellout, and then we've got this curved building here, which is the casino, and they've just put in a link there called the Skywalk, so we'll be like Gardens by the Sea in Singapore. But we've kept all of the heritage buildings, such as this mansion's 1889, designed by Addison. And that building was built in 1889, and they say the gargoyles on the top are symbolic of the fat cat politicians who built it. And on the left here, Harris Terraces, built in 1866, not quite so elaborate, but the developer, I'm sure, bit off more than he could chew there because it needed a lot of TLC. But this is the casino here that's starting to take shape, right beside the old government printing office, which was built in 1859, because once we had legislation being printed, we had to have somewhere, being passed I should say, we had to have somewhere to print it. Family. So this is a 4-star hotel on our left here, the Treasury Hotel run by the casino, and Queen's Park behind it has a statue of Queen Victoria. We were actually going to be called Cooksland after James Cook the explorer. However, in deference to Queen Victoria, we were called Queensland instead, overlooking in the Commonwealth of Australia. And Governor Lamington, it's a bit of a story, and I'll tell you on the way out to Mount Cootha. So we remember him in a few places in our city. This is the Queen Street Mall here, and it was closed off to the main shopping precinct of Brisbane. If you look to the left, you'll see Redcliffe Place and the premises of our Brisbane City Council local government. So we're building a tunnel on the left here to accommodate the Brisbane Metro, which will be integrated with our bus. The new, on the left is the new W Hotel. Down here on the left we have a building that houses an oil and gas company called Santos, and if you look at the facade of the building you'll notice that it's all tractor blades, and that's called Confluence, and it's meant to signify the ups and downs of getting entangled in the law. So if you, as we come past the law courts, look hard right and you'll see a wall full of eyes. And that wall full of eyes is by a Japanese artist, Kusawa. She's a very well-known artist, and it's meant to say the eyes of the law are on you. So we're coming into yet another area where massive construction is taking place, and this is the Roma Street station. It's always been a transport interchange. Previously it's been train and bus and still is. But we're going to add the metro to it very soon. So that's the Roma Street construction site. We've got a couple of teams in Brisbane now. The Broncos is the one that's been around for a long time, and we've got one based in the northern suburbs now called the Dolphins, and they've had a win. Their very first match was a win. That all takes place in the stadium that we're about to drive past, called Suncorp Stadium. But in fact, Suncorp Stadium's proper name is the Lang Park, and it takes its original name from Dunmore Lang, who was buried just here on the left. He was that Scottish Presbyterian minister who brought out those free immigrants. But Lang Park is a very well-oiled machine. They can get 50,000 people in and out of there. So you can see the Suncorp Stadium. And this is Milton Road, and this is one of the major arterial roads out to the west, and you'll see some examples of our iconic Queensland architecture here. So see if you can spot a little wooden house with a pyramid-shaped roof and a balcony with a curved roof. We call it a bullnose roof, and those houses so it just became 4X's, didn't it? So yeah, we have been brewing since the 1870s. A family by the name of Castlemaine set that up. They came from Melbourne, or near Melbourne anyway. And they actually brew on wooden barrels there, and they sell it at the Breakfast Creek Hotel. It's been flooded a few times too, just quietly. Everyone was very worried about the damage to the brewery. So you can see the flags flying at the brewery there. That the green and blue one with the white headdress, that's the flag for the Torres Strait Islands, and the one in the middle is the Aboriginal one, and the one on the left is the Queensland flag. So we're heading up to the Mount Cootha lookout, and when I woke up this morning I thought, oh, it's going to be raining, but we've been lucky so far, so keep your fingers crossed that it's going to be fine. No. So you can see Mount Cootha through the front windscreen right now. You'll see the television towers because they broadcast television from Mount Cootha. We call it Mount Cootha, but it's just a mountain. It's bushland reserve, and we're very lucky to have such a big area of bushland reserve set aside for the people of Brisbane, just a mere 7 kilometres from the central business district. And so there we have a lot of bush tracks. People hike up and down, they ride their bikes up and down. It is only 287 metres above sea level, and we do have some waterfalls on one side, sacred site of the Aborigines, and during the war it was where we stored ammunition, and we did discover a bit of gold there. We've got enough time at the Gallery of Modern Art and Art Gallery. There's a whole complex of galleries where we stop, and you can get a cup of coffee there because you can spread yourself out amongst. I think there's 5 coffee shops in that complex, and I'll explain what they are. So if I suggest that if you're really hanging out for a cup of coffee, that you hold on because it will be much quicker. Mount Cootha are pretty slow. So with a bit of luck we will see the mountain, the sand islands offshore. There's a lovely example of an old Queenslander on the left. See that pyramid-shaped roof? There's quite a lot in this area here. They're very expensive to maintain because there's an awful lot of painting there. cemetery, and unless your family bought a plot ages ago, I'm sorry, but you can't be buried there. So we're heading up to Mount Cootha, and Cootha is an Aboriginal word which means wild honey. But on our way, we're on Sir Samuel Griffith Drive, and Sir Samuel Griffith was a politician who was involved in the negotiations for the Australian Constitution. But immediately on our left we have the Mount Cootha Botanic Gardens, and in there they're huge botanic gardens, and we have a planetarium where we study the stars of the southern skies. It's named after the Governor, Sir Thomas Brisbane, because he was very interested in astronomy. And we've got a couple of lakes, we've got a herbarium, we've got a tropical dome, Japanese garden, we've got a bunya nut forest, a eucalypt forest. It's massive. So there's one of the kamikaze bicycle riders. It's almost a rite of passage, I think, if you're a long distance cyclist, that you ride up Mount Cootha. Landscape, and that is a blue metal quarry. I'm sure some of that blue metal is in several gardens around Brisbane and several retaining walls. And every road, yeah. So when we get up the top here, there are a few coaches about this morning. So if we find that there's insufficient bus parking, what we'll do is we'll drop off. And remember, you are coach number 1 with Neil and with Marilyn, coach number 1. And so basically it's have a look at the view. There's a souvenir shop, and to the left of the souvenir shop there are toilets, and have a look at the view, and then we're back on the coach. But if Neil has to move the coach, that's okay. I will be waiting at the there's a bit of a bus shelter there where we drop you off, and he will do a bit of a circuit and come back and get us. This is an opportunity to stretch your legs, and so far we're being looked after. It's not raining.
about a talking frog? Oh, it's got a mouthful. Oatmeal. So a talking frog hops into a bank and says, I'd like to apply for a $30,000 loan, thanks. They said, but you're a talking frog. He said, actually, I'm much more than that. I'm Mick Jagger's son. Oh, okay, well, you better go and see our loans officer. The frog hops over to the office and there's a sign on the wall that says, Loans Officer, Miss Patricia Whack. The frog says, good morning, Miss Whack. I'd like to apply for a $30,000 loan, thanks. She said, you're a talking frog. He said, that's right, but I'm Mick Jagger's son. Manager's known me for years, manager knows all about it. So with that, she panics a little bit and thinks, okay, Mr. Jagger, we better do the appropriate paperwork. So they fill out the application. She says, now, Mr. Jagger, do you have any collateral for this loan? And the frog says, as a matter of fact, I do. And pulls out this tiny little ivory carving. And she said, is that your collateral? He goes, yeah, look, show it to the manager. The manager's known me for years. The manager knows all about it. So she hops into the manager's office. She says, boss, you're not going to believe this, but there's a talking frog in my office. Wants a $30,000 loan, claims to be Mick Jagger's son, says you know him, know all about it. And he's giving me this as collateral. And I've got no idea what that is. The manager looks at it and goes, that's a knick-knack paddywhack, give the frog a loan, his old man's a rolling stone.
Okay, so it's a bit of a pity ours is a series of extinct volcanoes. You look out there now, you can see that's the main road west goes over those mountains, and we call it the scenic rim, which is a marketing term. But basically it's a number of extinct volcanoes. Australia's very, very old geologically, and what has happened is the solidified lava of the volcano remains, and the surrounds have eroded over time. So these botanic gardens on our right, I did mention that there are bunya nut forests. So bunya nut is very, very significant in Aboriginal culture. The Aboriginals, particularly the coast, during harvest time, which is around about March, and they would organise their marriages, they would have their corroborees, and they would have all of their festive activities around the harvest of the bunya nut. A bunya nut's really large, it's about the size of a football, and then they tear it apart and they roasted the individual segments of the bunya nut. But if one hit you on the head, you could probably suffer from concussion. So on our left here, the Toowong Cemetery once again, and on the right the Botanic Gardens, some of which we actually took part of the Botanic Gardens in order to construct a tunnel to the airport from here, and I'm sure that the people in the western suburbs were quite happy to see that tunnel built, because it's saving them an enormous amount of time when they commute to the airport from here. So what we're about to do you can't do in a car, because this is a bus only lane, and we're going to have yet another look at some of our unique Queensland architecture, somebody with a bit of money. So we're going through the suburb of Toowong very soon. Up these eucalyptus trees here are magnificent. They're pretty old, I'd say. So just on our right, look out for a working man's cottage. That's with the pyramid roof and the bullnose veranda. Just up here on the right there's a good example. The roof isn't quite as curved as what they normally are. That's that one there. That's a working man's cottage, but number 10 up here on the right, this is called Warrawee, and this is definitely built by people who had some money, built in the 1880s, and you'll notice a very elegant staircase up the front coming in from two directions. They tell me that that is to do with the women when they dismounted the horses. They brought the horse up to that platform and then they climbed off the horse. So this suburb here is called Toowong, and Toowong is an Aboriginal word, and it's because there's a bird here, the curlew, and it has a call that is very eerie. It goes like this: Toowong, Toowong, and that's why this suburb is called Toowong. But Toowong is actually adjacent to the University of Queensland. And the University of Queensland sits on a beautiful tract of land along the Brisbane River, which was donated to them by a philanthropic Irish family called the Main family, and there's a whole story that goes with that family. And I could... Oh, that must have just dropped off the tree. Village. Well, there's a railway station in there and a shopping centre, and if you had a railway station in the 1870s, well, you needed to have a pub nearby, and so as we turn the corner you'll see the Royal Exchange Hotel, and it's a heritage listed hotel, and it is a great watering hole for the university students. So university's back in full swing again. Being a full fee paying student, mainly money. So we're working our way back to the river again, and Coronation Drive. The locals don't like to use the full name. We call it Coro Drive. And the construction site just around the corner used to be the premises of the Australian Broadcasting Commission, this one that says Monarch. But that building was abandoned some time ago because they had a very high incidence of breast cancer and they could not explain it. On the left here, what used to be the Toowong Library, and it's hexagonal in shape, designed by a local Brisbane City Council architect who's won several awards, Birrelly. Then around the corner here on the left, the iconic Regatta Hotel, and it's named Regatta because we have rowing regattas on the river just here. And this is a Richard Gailey hotel. You can tell by the Victorian filigree, and it was built in the late 1800s. And one of the mothers of one of our actresses, the mother's name was Merle Thornton. She handcuffed herself to the bar in the Regatta Hotel in the late 1960s because in those days women could not, by law, drink at a public bar, and she believed that should change. On the left here is a lovely old house called Moorlands, which was built by the Main family, and they were the ones who donated the land to the University of Queensland. You can just see it now, actually. It's got a lovely turret, needs a bit of work on it, but it was also designed by Richard Gailey. Across the river here we have the suburb of West End, and West End was where a lot of our Italian and Greek migrants settled once they came after World War II, and then we had another draft of Vietnamese who came after the Vietnam War. These days West End is quite high density. Lots of apartments being built because we're low tier in Brisbane. that you will have to go up, not out. Now we're going to do a stop off at the art gallery, and as I mentioned, there's lots of little cafes in the art gallery. You cannot take a backpack. You can take a handbag, but you cannot take a backpack into the art galleries. So I suggest if you've got a backpack, you leave it on the bus, okay? Because Neil probably will have to do a few circuits in order to come back and get us. So once everyone's gathered together and I've got 32 people, I'll ring Neil and we'll load ready to go out to the airport. No, yeah, there'll be no. Right, so Neil will be shutting down the coach when he after he drops us off, so there'll be no air conditioning in the bus. Okay. Now, when we drop you, if you go to the right, you can go through the back entrance of the Queensland Art Gallery, and it's worth going through. All of these have fantastic gift shops, and they all have little cafes. But for the art galleries, you cannot take a backpack in there. And there's a cloakroom though. You can leave the backpacks in the cloakroom. Turn left, that you're heading towards the cafe. The museum has an excellent excellent gift shop, and the museum has a coffee shop upstairs on the concourse. The State Library has an open air cafe. That's the first one that you'll see from where you are dropped off. And the Gallery of Modern Art, once you disembark the coach, you turn left. And a bit of a walk and you're at the Gallery of Modern Art. So we've got permanent collections, an Australian and an international art collection, and the current GOMA, Gallery of Modern Art, which is the first building on the left, built in 2006. It actually has an exhibition called Air. This is the Kurilpa Bridge here. Kurilpa is an Aboriginal word that means water rat. So there's a riverside cafe along the banks of the river on the other side on the riverside of the art gallery, and then the State Library, their coffee shop is. We will walk past it as we walk towards the river. The Gallery of Modern Art has a very good gift shop as well. Please make sure, everybody, that you are back, because we only get one go at this. This is a council bus stop. I hope you enjoyed yourselves there. We have a lovely complex. All of these buildings here were designed by Robin Gibson, and they were finished in 1986, I think it was. It's going to be the domestic airport, and the second drop-off is going to be the international airport, okay? So the domestic one will come first. Those of you who have got long layovers, there is a Skygate shuttle bus. It is a free bus, and it goes between the domestic and the international airport and a factory outlet shopping centre. It's every 30 minutes, and there is a visitor information desk, and make sure that you allow a couple of hours. So that Skygate bus is free, and there are luggage lockers at the shopping centre, and I believe there are luggage lockers at the international airport as well. So that's a good way to be able. There's a supermarket, a chemist, factory outlet shops at DFO, so you can spend a bit of time there. So this here is our backpacker area. We've already come around here, and this terrace here is called Petrie Terrace, and that's after that Scottish family of builders. And we're going to pretend that we're footballers now, because when we have a big football game, we drive the footballers. Are we going to go left, aren't we? We're not. Oh, Neil's just trying to trick me. For the football stadium. And there's a hotel down there called Gambaros, and just recently they had mud crab races there. So these are the old army barracks here, Victoria Barracks, and that would be heritage listed. There's a bit of a museum in there. So you'll see some great examples of terrace houses along here, because this area here is very, very old. Brisbane and Women's Hospital, and we've got a research centre attached to that called the Clive Berghofer Research Centre. Clive Berghofer was a Lord Mayor in a city called Toowoomba, about 2 hours west of Brisbane, and they've done some amazing research and developed some vaccines who a number of women, I'm sure, are very happy about, including one for cervical cancer. So on the right we have Victoria Park, which is being refashioned at the moment, and two of our private schools, boys and girls grammar, cost you in the vicinity of $30,000 to send your kids there each year, that is. See the Clive Berghofer Medical Research Centre there. So our first stop is the domestic airport, and once you've claimed your luggage, what I suggest you do, there are lifts up onto the overhead concourse, and you go over to the Qantas, Virgin, Rex terminals, and there is a visitor information in the arrivals area downstairs where the luggage claim is if you need some help. So those of you who are going to the international terminal, those to the international terminal, please stay on the coach. Those of you who are getting off here, please make sure you've got your hand luggage with you, backpacks, iPads, all the souvenirs that you've just bought, don't forget them. Have a good look, because we won't be checking until we're at the international terminal, and then it could be too late. So you can see the concourse here.